These days, a lot of people complain that cars look very similar, but that is not an accusation that you can level at the Hyundai Kona. What we have here is the 2.0 Active variant, a mid-level model, and we're going to tell you everything you need to know about this hot entrant into the B SUV segment in this video. Now, before we start our walk around, I'm going to do something a little bit interesting. The Hyundai Kona is available with a remote start function, which is triggered by just hitting the lock button and then pressing and holding the start button, which will then make the car do that. Now, the benefit of this, obviously, is if you parked your car somewhere like a car park like this on a hot sunny day, you can cool your car down by remote starting it as you're walking towards it. But of course, today is incredibly cloudy and kind of cool, so there's absolutely no need for that. Now, the Hyundai Kona that we have here is of course a facelift model. The pre-facelift was only in the local market for what felt like about 6.5 minutes before this one arrived. Now, with the facelift, it's a very comprehensive change. So you have a completely new fascia with this much more prominent cascading grille. You still get the dual tier lighting system though, where you have the LED daytime running lights as well as the indicators up top and the LED headlights at the bottom. These are automatic high beam too. There are actually fog lights down there, halogen fog lights, tiny little things, but you don't really need them most of the time. Now, moving down the side, you can see that the Hyundai Kona's black body cladding continues to be quite prevalent, but it's been reprofiled slightly and somehow it just really works with this car. Now, you have 18-inch dual-tone alloy wheels with a diamond turn finish wrapped in Continental Premium Contact 6 tires, and this car is finished in this gorgeous color, which is referred to as Dive in Jeju. Very creative. Now, moving down the side, you can see that this is very much a compact SUV, a B-segment SUV through and through, but it's made to look very active with all this body cladding all the way around it and even this little bit of contrast silver stuff going on down there. You also have this little black panel here to try and separate the roof to give it a floating roof effect. Whether or not it does so remains to be seen, but you know, at least they tried. Going down to the back though, again, you still have a dual tier lighting system as you saw at the front. So you have the brake lights and positioning lights up here, as well as the indicators, fogs and reverse down here. Now, these are LED, the indicators are LED, but of course the reverse and fogs are bulbs, which are, you know, standard fare. The body cladding continues down the back here, done in black with a little bit of contrasting in silver, and you have a little bit of a spoiler back here. Now, like I said, the Kona is a very distinctive looking car, but even though it's a B-segment SUV, a very expressive B-segment SUV at that, it does not compromise in terms of practicality. So behind the rear seats, you actually have a decent amount of room. You can see here, these are all the bags that we need for our equipment and some for shopping. And you can see that we have plenty of room back here. If you put 4 adults in here, let's say on a drive with some friends, for example, you can definitely fit all the luggage they need in here. There is actually a little bit of space underneath the boot floor because we don't have a spare tire in this car, but you know, it's not an unfinished area. It's not carpeted or anything, so anything you put in there is going to rattle. There's also no power operation for the tailgate, even though this car is in excess of 130,000 ringgit, owing mostly to the fact that it's fully imported from South Korea. Now, I understand as I explain the price, you might be looking at this thinking, wait a second, this is a little bit expensive. But as we move into the interior, you'll see where it justifies its price. Now, this is where I think a lot of the money has been spent. For starters, look at this gorgeous white leather. When was the last time you saw white leather in a car in this segment? Now, these seats, this is actual leather. It's not faux leather. Unfortunately, it's not ventilated or heated for that matter, but they do look very good. Now, in this 2-litre active model, only the driver's seat is powered. This is manual, but you do have height adjustment on both sides. Now, this interior, moving away from the seats, this interior looks very well designed. You have a floating touchscreen in the middle here, which admittedly has the biggest bezels I've ever seen, but it's not too bad. In terms of functionality, it's excellent because you have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which makes up for the fact that the bezels are enormous, and you do have these physical buttons down here, which means it's very easy for you to find things. I actually set up this little favorite button to immediately pull up Android Auto, which makes my life a lot easier. Now, in front of me is a digital instrument cluster. This is by far and away one of the best digital instrument clusters currently available in this segment, at least in the mainstream market within this size category, because It's incredibly high res, it's incredibly high refresh rate, the graphics are excellent, and even when you change drive mode, there's lots of different animations to it, and it's just really well executed, and I absolutely love this thing. But as if this wasn't enough, they've given me another display in the form of the heads-up display, which I cannot currently deploy because the car is off. Now, admittedly, it doesn't project onto the screen, it projects onto like this little perspex thing that comes out, which feels a little bit old school, but at least the display itself is all color. You get all your information on there, including track information when you change tracks or when the track changes on Android Auto, and you also get blind spot sort of indicators there. So even before you indicate, even before that light in the wing mirror goes off, you know if there's a vehicle in your blind spot, telling you even earlier whether or not it's safe to maneuver or even indicate for that matter. Now, in terms of the driving position, this steering wheel is both reach and rake adjustable. These seats are quite adjustable, front, rear, all that, yeah, typical electric seats, and you do also have power lumbar. Now, going back to the middle, you get a single zone climate control, but like I said, it's single zone, but you do have this 3-level automated functions. You can have low, medium, and high, so that even in auto, you can still regulate how much air blows out, because as we know, sometimes when you leave a car in auto, it sort of creates this huge gust of wind in the car and actually gets quite uncomfortable. Now, all the buttons that you see here, these are all the tactility here is excellent. They feel very high quality. Even these knobs and switches, they just feel really nice to use. And that's sort of like the prevailing thing in this car. All the buttons, all the switchgear in this car feel good to use. Even the vents down the side. Now, looking at the center console, this is obviously your gear selector, which is still a mechanical thing. You have your selection for the front parking sensors, and now with the facelift, you no longer get a handbrake, which has freed up a little bit more space here for card holders and so on. And you have an electronic parking brake here with an auto hold function. Now, in terms of space at the rear, this car is a bit small. If you were to compare this to, say, the Honda HR-V, there's a lot more space going on back there, but in this car, it's a little bit more limited. Legroom and headroom is not bad, but the thing is, it's definitely not cavernous. You can tuck your feet in underneath the driver or passenger seat, which does make things a little bit more comfortable, but again, this is not a cavernous interior. It's a lot more cozy. This car feels more European than it does Asian, and that is certainly a good thing for more discerning and sophisticated customers, particularly the ones that Hyundai is targeting in the upper mainstream segment. Now, adding to that appeal, of course, is the way it drives, which we'll talk about in the next segment. Now, driving the Hyundai Kona reveals quite a few things. For starters, it might look very distinctively Korean on the outside, but that certainly isn't the way it feels behind the wheel. So under the bonnet, there is a 2-litre SmartStream engine, which is a naturally aspirated engine, paired to a SmartStream CVT automatic gearbox. Now, the CVT automatic pretends as best it can to be or act like a torque converter automatic, and I must say that it does do so relatively well. And the 2-litre naturally aspirated engine it feels a little bit old school here, simply because we're so used to turbocharged engines, particularly in cars of this nature. But it's certainly not a bad engine, and the CVT gearbox does do a very good job at ensuring that it is always sort of within the torque band, and you always have the performance necessary as and when you need it. It's quite a reactive system. Now, when I say that this car doesn't feel particularly Korean from behind the wheel, I think I refer to the way people used to assume Korean cars would feel, which is a little bit cheap, a little bit unrefined, a little bit simple. And this car is certainly none of those things. So, for starters, there's a very European sensibility in the way it goes about its business. So, the steering, for example, is both very light in town at lower speeds, and it still weights up rather naturally when you're driving at motorway speeds, when you're just cruising along. The amazing thing for me, of course, is the fact that even though this is ultimately an electric power steering, the weighting is very natural. So when it adds weight as you climb up the speedometer, it doesn't at any point feel like you're disconnected from the road beneath you. On top of that, the NVH levels in this car are also quite impressive. So there's precious little wind noise, although there is admittedly a little bit of road roar from the 18-inch alloy wheels, but at no point does it feel unrefined. I'm doing about 100 kilometers an hour now on the Elite Highway, which is notorious for having a slightly noisy surface, but despite that, I certainly don't feel uncomfortable. Aiding to this, of course, is the fact that this car comes with a relatively comprehensive suite of active safety systems like lane keep assist and blind spot monitoring, and it even has almost level 2 semi-autonomy, because if you press a little button here, it actually gives you this active steering assist, which keeps you in the center of the lane and it keeps you sort of in the heading that you want to be in. And it is active, so it will sort of make tiny adjustments sort of to keep you in the middle of the lane, the sort of adjustments that you would have had to make in a car without a system like this. Now, unfortunately, when I say it's almost level 2, it's because this car doesn't come with adaptive cruise control, and so you still have to modulate the speed yourself. But admittedly, by making all of these small corrections for you, it does do a lot insofar as keeping the driver feeling fresh and not too labored, especially when you're driving over longer distances. It must be said that the lane keep assist in this car is very good. It is easily one of the best systems I've sampled within the mainstream market in terms of how it adapts to different situations and how it keeps the car in the middle of the lane. The blind spot monitoring is also excellent, not only because it's very attentive and very alert, but also because paired to the heads-up display, you can actually see if there is a vehicle in your blind spot, it will actually come out with a little indicator in your full color heads-up display, and as a result, it means that it prevents you from even considering a maneuver that might put you in a dangerous situation. In most other cars, the indicator is out on the wing mirror, and you'll only hear an audible warning when you hit the indicator. So it requires you to sort of shift your gaze, and it also requires you to hit the indicator before you're actually warned that there is a vehicle or an obstruction in your blind spot, whereas here, you'll know preemptively even before you hit the indicator, which I think is a pretty novel idea. Of course, this car also comes with autonomous emergency braking, though admittedly it is relatively low speed. I'm not actually sure how effective this is in terms of the speed with which it's effective or with which it's active, but it has triggered a couple of times as I was slowing down to a traffic light, so at least I do know it's there. And there is also rear cross traffic alert with rear AEB, which triggered once when I was reversing out of a parking space, and sure enough the car primed the brakes before I could react, and by the time I did, because the brakes were primed, I managed to come to a stop quite quickly. Now, that's all one matter. The other matter that I want to touch on is the ride and handling in this car. So the reason why I say this car feels very European is because the way it rides across surfaces feels very sophisticated. Asian cars are generally known to be quite floaty, so they're very comfortable, but their primary ride tends to be very soft, so it smooths out the worst of the imperfections. But then as a result, the secondary ride, the car doesn't settle quite as quickly as a European car would. Whereas driving this, in all honesty, it feels like something from VW, for example, or in fact an older BMW, because the primary ride is not uncomfortable, but it's not soft, so you feel very sort of in tune with what's going on. The car follows the curvatures of the road quite well, but in terms of the secondary ride, the car settles very quickly as well. So for example, if you hit a pothole in the middle of a bump, the car settles down very quickly, and as a result it gives you a bit more confidence, particularly when you're touring. Now, this also translates, of course, to the handling. This car, through twisty corners, is surprisingly good. Now, admittedly, if you're attacking a back road, you will feel a little bit of a shortfall in terms of the performance of the 2-litre SmartStream engine, as well as the reaction times from the CVT automatic gearbox. I feel like this combination is geared more towards sort of town driving, as well as perhaps more urban type drivers. If you're like me, where your car is primarily used on weekends, where you want to go out and have a little bit of fun and also be able to eke out a little bit of playfulness from the chassis of the vehicle that you're driving, then you will most likely want to get, for example, the Hyundai Kona 1.6 turbo, or even the 1.6 turbo N-line. Both of those cars offer a little bit more punch, a little bit more response, both from the engine as well as the gearbox. And I'm made to understand that the larger wheels on the Kona N-line also means that the car itself feels a little bit more agile than this. Not that this isn't a good steer, but you know that this car can do a little bit better with that powertrain and wheel combination. That said though, I'm not, as I walk away from this car, because this is towards the end of the review, I'm actually driving back to Hyundai to hand this over, and I've spent the last few days with this car, and I have to say I am very impressed. Yes, this car is a little bit expensive. Being a fully imported model from South Korea, it's never going to be competitive against cars like the Proton X50 or the Honda HR-V or even the Renault Captur for that matter. But for what it's worth, for the price that it commands, I think it does so pretty convincingly. It looks incredible both inside and out. The choice of materials is fantastic. I absolutely love this white leather. If I'm honest, every time I walk up towards this car and the interior lights come on, I look at it and go, wow, this car looks so special. And I feel like that is what that premium is about. You're paying a little bit more than you would the competition in order to have a car that makes you feel special, and I certainly feel that this car does the trick. Of course, like I said, you will have to pay more if you want the turbocharged engines, but it's not really a deal breaker for me. Yes, I would like the punch from a turbo. Yes, I would like the response from the dual clutch automatic, but as it stands now, it is still a massively impressive car, and it is something that I would recommend to people who happen to be shopping in this price range. It's a fantastic thing. And if you were to ask me, this is definitely something that I would personally consider for my own use. I love the fact that it's distinctive. I love the way it drives. I love all of the specifications in here. I would like I would like adaptive cruise control, but it's not a deal breaker. I think all of the safety systems available are enough to sort of alert me in case that something terrible happens and I need to intervene. And so I feel like this car is very well specified. I think all in all, it's worth saying that Hyundai has done an incredible job with this car. I think with the Kona facelift, they did a lot more than just give it an aesthetic nip and tuck. There are a few refinement changes, and the spec changes in this car sort of help make it look and feel a lot more appealing. Of course, this car will never sell in the volumes as the Honda HR-V, like I mentioned earlier, but that's not what this car is about. If you understand what the Hyundai Kona is about, if you understand that it's about giving you a more distinctive left field option, a vehicle that allows you to be unique without compromise, then suddenly it just makes so much sense. I'm so glad that I had a chance to sort of sample this car and understand its character a little bit more, because admittedly when it came out I was scratching my head a bit, but now that I have, it makes perfect sense. It's not going to be for everyone, but that's really not the point. Anyway, that's been our review of the Hyundai Kona 2-litre Active. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon so you're notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe, jangan bodoh.